name's Hido, and welcome to the Pantheon. And it's Elder Dragon time. And in red-white. This Lorehold card is really, really cool. If you like attacking, well, he liked attacking, so it's a match made in heaven. And that guy is Velomachus Lorehold, weighing in a hefty 7 mana, which for Boros is a bit of a stretch, not renowned for its ramp, but I believe we can get there, together as friends. What does he do? He's an Elder Dragon, and he has flying, vigilance, and haste. So as soon as you cast him, you can get to doing what he does best, which is, whenever he attacks, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may cast an instant or sorcery card with mana value less than or equal to Velomachus Lorehold's power from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Really, really cool that you get it for free. You don't have to pay any extra mana or anything. It's just very, very powerful. But he's a 5/5, which there's already been 2 7s, so he costs 7 mana. You exile 7 cards, and then he's a 5/5. Why is he not a 7/7? It feels a bit off, but it is what it is. And he is a very, very powerful commander. There's some very cool cards that we can play with it. So without further ado, let's have a look at number 5. Coming at number 5, we have Endless Horizons. Now, the fact he's 7 mana is a bit of an issue. And his ability, we could potentially hit a bunch of lands or artifacts and things that we don't want to see with his ability. Endless Horizons is a perfect card for that. It's an enchantment. When it comes into play, search your library for any number of plains cards and remove them from the game. Then shuffle your library. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a card that was removed from the game with Endless Horizons into your hand. So each turn you're going to be getting a land. It doesn't ramp you, but it guarantees you essentially drawing an extra card. It's a land, which is what we want. We want to get to 7 mana. We want to swing in with this massive beastie thing. And this is the perfect card for it. Gift of Estates is a similar card along these lines. 2 mana for a sorcery. I really focused on instant and sorceries because even if we swing and we hit one of these, at least we're getting a bit of value. Gift of Estates says, if an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for up to 3 plains cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand. Then shuffle your library. Library? I don't know what a library is, but the likelihood is our opponents will have more lands than us. Tithe is a very similar card to this, 1 mana instant. Search your library for a plains card. If you control fewer lands than target opponent, you may search your library for an additional plains card. Reveal those cards to all players and put them into your hand. Shuffle your library. It's a great bit of value, essentially drawing you 2 cards. We're going to be behind on lands. And then finally, Jeska's Will, 3 mana for a sorcery. Choose one. If you control a commander, you may cast a spell. You can choose both. So if we're in the middle of combat, we will get a ton of red mana, but we've got a couple of instants we could use, and it also exiles the top 3 cards of our library. If we're playing this early on turn 3 or 4, and we've got a white mana open, there's a high likelihood that our opponents will have 6 cards, and we can cast Velomachus off just this card. Absolutely fantastic, and it's a good bit of card advantage. Which brings on to number 4. These are the sort of cards that we want to be seeing when we're attacking. We want our opponent's board to be crippled, and ours to, keep rocking. Urza's Ruinous Blast is a 5 mana legendary sorcery. You may cast a legendary sorcery only if you control a legendary creature or planeswalker. Exile all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. So, our commander is legendary. He's going to stick around. We're going to be attacking again with him. And importantly, this is 5 mana, so even though he isn't the 7/7 I want him to be, Velomachus can hit this. Along the same lines, we've got Tragic Arrogance, a 5 mana sorcery. For each player, you choose from among the permanents that player controls an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker. Ugh. Can't lower my finger. Then each player sacrifices all of the non-land permanents he or she controls. So you're going to keep your best stuff, probably your commander, and your opponents, they can keep a token. To hell with it, why not? Slash the Ranks, very similar sort of card. 5 mana for a sorcery. Destroy all creatures and planeswalkers except for commanders. We're going to keep our commander. We've just swung in, done some damage, and then there's nothing else on the field. Divine Reckoning, very similar. 4 mana. Each player chooses a creature they control, destroy the rest. Flashback for 7 mana. Exactly the same. We want to keep our commander. He's our main boy. And our opponents, yeah, they can keep whatever they want. To hell with them. But that takes us onto a bit more rude cards that we could potentially be playing. Armageddon, 4 mana. Destroy all lands. Okay, so we've ramped. We've got all our lands onto the field. Our commander swings in. We don't need them anymore, and neither do our opponents. We don't want our opponents having lands, so let's blow them up. Let's just blow everything to pieces. Cataclysm works in a very similar way. 4 mana for a sorcery. Each player chooses from among permanents he or she controls an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a land, then sacrifices the rest. So we're obviously going to keep our commander, 1 land, who cares, one of our artifacts that's hopefully helped us ramp, and Endless Horizons, an enchantment. What a card. What a selection that we've got there. We're going to keep getting lands. It's going to be great. Finally, Restore Balance, which doesn't have a mana cost, but through Velomachus, you can cast this. Sorcery. It's white. Suspend 6. Are we going to suspend this? No, we don't want to know. We don't want our opponents to know that it's coming. So, what does it say? Each player chooses a number of lands he or she controls equal to the number of lands controlled by the player who controls the fewest. Then sacrifices the rest. Player sacrifice creatures, discards card the same way. So, Velomachus, we're going to have 1 creature at least. We're going to sacrifice. Hopefully, our opponents have, a bit of a bigger board state, and they're going to have to sacrifice down. Same with lands. We're probably going to have the fewest lands. We can cripple our opponents that way. And with red-white, we don't have much card advantage. We're not going to have that big of a hand. We're going to take them down in that way as well. Which brings me on to our 3rd pick, which is a risky one. Chance of Glory is a 3 mana instant. Creatures you control gain indestructible. They have indestructible forever. It never ends this ability, so you have to remember that everything's indestructible. Take an extra turn after this one. Ooh, pretty cool. At the beginning of that turn's end step, you lose the game. Okay, fair enough. But if we hit this off Velomachus, we get a whole turn to swing in and, have a look at another 7. But we don't want to lose the game, do we? Last Chance is a 2 mana sorcery. Take an extra turn off this one at the beginning of that turn's end step. You lose the game. And Final Fortune is an instant that costs 2. Take an extra turn off this one. At the end of that turn, you lose the game. So if we're looking through 7 cards, we could end up seeing one of these. But the main thing we want is a way to not lose the game. Gideon of the Trials is a 3 mana planeswalker. And the main thing we're looking at is his 0 ability. The second one, actually. You get an emblem with, as long as you control a Gideon planeswalker, you can't lose the game. And your opponents can't win the game. So if we've cast Last Chance and Gideon's on the field, when it comes to the end of that extra turn, our opponents, we go to lose the game. Gideon prevents it. We're still alive. We're still swinging in with Velomachus. Absolutely fantastic. A couple of cards that are very similar to this. Angel's Grace, 1 mana instant with split second. You can't lose the game this turn, and your opponents can't win the game this turn. Until end of turn, damage that would reduce your life total to 1, reduces it to 1 instead. So the fact that it has split second essentially makes it uncounterable. A split second means that they can't, your opponents, or indeed you, can't put anything else onto the stack in front of this, so you can't counter it. Platinum Angel is a 7 mana angel with 4/4 with flying. You can't lose the game, and your opponents can't win the game. Excellent. Cool card, and if our opponents are a combo deck, all these things help us not lose the game, which is important as well. Sundial Infinite is the final one and is the most useless in the deck. This deck, because it only really stops this. There's not many interactions with this, like an Umbeka deck might have. 2 mana for an artifact, pay 1, tap it, end the turn. Activate this ability only during your turn. Which means exile all spells and abilities on the stack. Discard down to your maximum hand size, damage-wise off, and this turn and until end of turn effects end. So the important thing is, we go to lose the game. In response to that trigger, we end the turn. We're not dead. Really, really good. Which brings us on to number 2. Not Forgotten, which is a uncommon that I think most of you have forgot about. 2 mana for a sorcery. Put target card from a graveyard on top or bottom of its owner's library. Put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So the 1/1 spirit is a nice little added bonus, but we can put one of our big spells back on top. Maybe an extra turn, maybe some cards that are in at number 1, which might involve extra combat steps. Another couple of cards like this are Mizzix's Mastery. Once these big spells get into the graveyard, why don't we use them again? So these cards help us do that. Mizzix's Mastery is a 4-mana sorcery. Exile target card that's an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. For each card exiled this way, copy it, and you may cast that copy without paying its mana cost. So we can take another extra turn, or maybe an extra combat step. Who knows? Recoup is a 2-mana sorcery. Oh, and also Mizzix's Mastery has Overload, which means you can target everything in your graveyard. So you can have a ton of extra turns that will all die after one another. It'd be a nightmare. Recoup, 2-mana sorcery. Target sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. And then this spell has flashback, so we can flashback something else. Past in Flames, 4 mana for sorcery. Each instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. Then we can flashback Past in Flames. So we can chain together a bunch of extra turns or a bunch of extra combat. And speaking of which, in at number 1, Savage Beating. 5 mana instant. Play Savage Beating only during your turn and only during combat. Choose one. Creatures you control gain double strike until end of turn, and untap all creatures you control, and after this phase, there's an additional combat phase. You can entwine it for 2 mana. So this does everything we want. It gives Velomachus another turn, another combat step to look at another 7 cards. We could even hit one of these cards to give it flashback and then recast it. Well, not this one specifically, this is an instant, but World at War, however, is a sorcery. 5 mana for a sorcery. After the first post-combat main phase, this turn, there's an additional combat phase, followed by an additional main phase. At the beginning of combat, untap all creatures that attack this turn. And it has rebound, which means if you've cast it from your hand, you get to put it into exile. And at the beginning of your next turn's upkeep, you cast it again. So you get 2 combats in a row. But that only works, the rebound at least, if you've cast it from your hand. So hitting it with Velomachus doesn't do that. However, we've got another couple of cards that give us extra combat. Aurelia the War Leader, absolute classic, 6 mana 3/4 with flying, vigilance, and haste. Whenever it attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. So Velomachus looks at another 7, potentially casts a spell that kills us. Really good fun. Morag, Fury of Akun, is a 6 mana 6/6. Each creature you control gets +1/+0 for each time it's attacked this turn. So Velomachus could get up to be that mythical 7/5. Although actually it becomes 6/5 and then an 8/5. So he doesn't. He just gets... Anyway. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. At the beginning of that combat, untap all creatures you control. This works excellently with any sort of fetch land, and you can just churn through your deck using Velomachus' ability. Finally, we've got another couple of extra combat steps. Unfortunately, these don't work with Velomachus because of the way that they're worded. So Ways of Regression and Seize the Day both say untap all creatures... Well, I'll deal with them one at a time. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Ways of Regression says untap all creatures that attack this turn. After this main phase, there's an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase. The problem with what that's saying is that it says after this main phase. If we try to cast it in combat, we can cast it, but we're not in a main phase, so we never proceed past that part of the spell, which is a bit of an issue. But at least it has retrace. If we're casting it from our hand, we can discard a card. We can discard a land from our hand as an additional cost to cast it from our graveyard. Seize the Day is a 4 mana sorcery. Untap target creature. After this main phase, there is an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase. So again, the issue is that it's saying additional in the main phase. Then we can flash it back for 3 mana, so we could, have another combat step again. Aggravated Assault is a 3 mana enchantment, 5 mana, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase, followed by an additional main phase. Play this ability only any time you can play a sorcery. We got up to 10 mana, 2 additional combat steps, and it's just absolutely game-ending. It can be phenomenal in this deck. And those are my top 5 cards for Velomachus. Really cool commander. I think he's pretty powerful, to be fair, but he doesn't really do anything that Boris hasn't been doing before. But he's an Elder Dragon, so that's fun. If you like this video, please subscribe, and I'll be coming back at you with some more things about Commander. Bye.